On the very first move, a pawn landmine removed White's pawn on the e4 square. This changes things. White was attempting to take control of the center of the board with their first move, but now they don't have a piece there at all. This means that Black can grab the center a lot easier, and Black gets a greater advantage because of this landmine activation immediately out of the gate. White's second move of the game was c2 to c3. This also hit a pawn landmine, so now White has made two moves that have resulted in them losing a piece. The next landmine activation happened when Black moved their pawn from d7 to d5. Black hit a pawn landmine. Here they were attempting to control the center of the board with both of their pawns, but instead the landmine removed their pawn, but it also opened up the d file for their queen to come down. White moved their knight to e4 to attack Black's queen on f6. Black attempted to save their queen by moving it to g6, but there was a queen landmine waiting for them, and they lost their queen. This was a big hit for Black because they lost their strongest piece to a landmine. However, right after that, White moved their knight to c5 and they hit a knight landmine, losing their knight. Black lost more points, but it did help that White also lost a piece to a landmine immediately after. At this point in the game, White had an advantage because Black had lost their queen. So now, White decided to attack the center of the board. Black had moved their pawn up to the d4 square and it was a problem for White, so White moved their rook over to d1 to apply extra pressure on that pawn. However, they hit a rook landmine and lost their rook. After losing their rook, White was now behind in the game and they decided to make a defensive move. They moved their pawn from g2 to g3, but unfortunately there was a pawn landmine waiting for them and they lost their pawn. Black was in a commanding lead this game, so White had to focus on defense. White attempted to protect their king by moving their queen to the f1 square, but they hit a queen landmine and lost their queen. This meant now that the game was a mate in 3 in Black's favor. Black attempted to go for checkmate and finished the mate in 3 by moving their rook to the g2 square. However, Black then hit a rook landmine and lost their rook. Now the game had moved to a mate in 17. Black was attempting to follow through with the forced mate that was now available. It required them to promote one of their pawns. However, they lost their pawn to a pawn landmine on the f5 square. Black suffered another blow when they moved their knight to the b3 square, taking out one of White's pawns. Here, they encountered a knight landmine and lost their knight. In order to win the game, Black still had to promote a pawn. They ended up moving their pawn to the b5 square and hit a pawn landmine, losing it. Eventually, Black was able to get a pawn across the board, promote it, and win the game. If you like these trap activations, please subscribe to stay in touch. One day you'll be able to own your own trap chess game. Thank you for watching.